Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Phil. I'm doing really well. How about yourself?
Oh, good. Good to meet you finally. Our paths were supposed to cross, I think, a few times, and it's good to connect with each other on Zoom. Where are you right now?
I'm in Florida. I'm just north of Tampa.
Okay. And so we're going to see you at the Multiple Pathways of Recovery conference coming up, right?
It certainly sounds like that, right?
Yeah. And I, you were a presenter in Colorado, and I hear your workshop went over really well. Um, I was just telling you, and I'll say it again. I was so fascinated that when we put out your workshop for that conference, that on, I think was it called Psychedelic Assisted Recovery? Was that the title of it?
I think that it was.
Yeah.
That's the name of the pathway,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure what title that I had along with it. But psychedelic was a key word in there.
Yeah. And I had, while we were promoting that conference, somebody in Connecticut emailed me and said that they couldn't possibly go if we were going to support that pathway. And I wrote, and I was like, yes, that's exactly the kind of thing we're interested in generating because I'm not really invested that you have to believe in this or not believe in it. I just want people to have the information, and I trust that they will be able to make their own decision, right? So why not have it? And if we're getting people talking about it before they even heard you or know anything about it, I think that's fascinating.
Well, I think that there is a certain stigma and misunderstanding that still go along with psychedelics. I mean, the first thing that I certainly would think about right off the bat would be the Grateful Dead in the 60s. So,
Yes.
you know,
Six, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
yeah.
Yeah. I tell you what, this is a little known secret. Well, I've told friends, but I don't think I've ever mentioned it on the podcast before. But that, I did acid, LSD back early in the 80s, three times, and it was some of the most enjoyable things I have ever done, those three trips, if you will. And I'm not, glorifying drug use or anything like that. However, to say that, I'm 30, approaching 35 years in recovery of abstinent based recovery, right? And that is the thing that still intrigues me. And I know I'm not alone in that. Like Bill Wilson talked about all this and stuff, but so I'm fascinated with this. Not that I'm going to go pursue psychedelic assisted recovery at this point in my life, but can never say never, right? Being perfectly honest. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I do have that kind of back the drug culture. My trips were fantastic. I didn't have a bad trip, but that's not what we're talking about here, is it? Or is it?
No, 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 absolutely right. Absolutely not. However, that was just like you. That was how I had my introduction. These really pleasurable, pleasant experiences. And in fact, they did lead me to tour with the Grateful Dead.
Mm-hmm.
I went out, I was working in Connecticut as a telemarketer. I was working in New Haven for the Firefighters Union, making phone calls for them, and they gave us a week off. And it just happened to be when some shows were in the Midwest. And I decided, well, I'll pack up and I'll go and see one show. And 2 years later, I was still on tour. And there's a huge difference between those days when I was taking acid and when I was taking mushrooms for fun, for the enjoyment behind it, for the recreational part of it. However, there's a much different side to psychedelics that have helped me, and I think that deserves to be recognized.
Great. So, um, I don't even know where to start with you. Where do you want to start? I mean, you talked about all of a sudden picking up and going on the Grateful Dead tour. I got so many questions about, but how did you get to that point? Why did that become of interest to you?
Geez, I started. My mom was a counselor. She did intake work at Gunster House in Bridgeport,
I remember
and
that place. Wow. Wow.
yeah, it was a great place,
Yeah.
and I remembered going down there with her as a teenager and being able to meet all the guys. And I also did 12-step calls with her. So, I didn't use drugs for a long time, and but before I did. I began reading a lot of books. I remember reading The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by Tom Wolfe. I remember this was before I did drugs now. I remember reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And I said, I think that there's something here. I could really identify with the way that people carried themselves then. They were a lot more loving, but they were a lot more open about their beliefs. And that was one of the reasons why I really resonated with it. And then once I began to experiment with LSD, then other things began to happen. Unfortunately, my LSD use also coincided with my addiction, because within a few years of initially using acid, I was using crack. So a lot of that went away.
Hmm. What was 2 years with the Grateful Dead like?
It was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was complete freedom, but you have a lot of different people that go to the shows. You have wealthy people, or people that just might shoot in for one show, and then you have the people that actually follow the Grateful Dead around. And out of those folks, everybody has a little hustle. They try to find a way of making money. And some people might sell grilled cheese sandwiches. Other people may sell imported beer. And I ended up selling acid to be able to get around the country. So, it was a lot of fun. However, I took a lot of risks, and I eventually had to end my tour because of that.
You cracked me up already. Grilled cheese sandwiches, domestic beer, or acid, the little side hustles.
Well, or the other one that was always big was nitrous, right?
Mm,
So what people would do would be they would either steal tanks of NO2, or they would work out deals with dentists. And
mm.
so they'd bring these big 60-pound tanks and be pumping out balloons, and you have these big lines of people huffing balloons. And, I had a balloon or two in my time,
Mm-hmm.
but, after a while, you get tired of falling down.
What years were you out there with them?
Yeah, so I initially started going to shows in '89, and I started on tour on July 4th in 1990. That would have been the Sandstone, and that would have been in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
How do
and
you describe of the group of the people that were the Deadheads that toured with everyone? What was the organizational, what was the culture like? How would you describe the culture?
well, I mean, it was like a huge family. It
Hmm.
was truly a huge family of people that went around. Hey, look, if you look at it in the perspective of the 12-step programs, right? You had people that had a common purpose that were trying to do one thing, and they stuck together.
Mm.
So it was a very unique opportunity, and you met a lot of I met a lot of very kind, caring, loving, intelligent individuals. However, there was a darker side. A lot of the people who were like me that sold acid also had habits. There was a group of people that toured with the Dead that just sold heroin. So you have to understand that the lot scene wasn't always pretty. I mean, if you go as a tourist, you may not see all that, but after you've been doing it for a little while, you did see the darker side. Overall, though, I can say that it was a beautiful experience, and like something that I'll never forget. Nobody will be able to take it away from me. And I'm one of those people that don't believe that any of the new bands that are out there that don't have Jerry Garcia, I just don't see them as being the Grateful Dead. No matter what they brand themselves at, the music just isn't the same without his spirit, and that's the truth of the matter.
I believe you. So after your tour, what happened?
Well,
In a
geez,
nutshell.
yeah. What I was doing was I traveled with a friend, and we would sell acid together. And so after he would sell the acid to people, I would ask them, "Well, if this is something that you liked, I will mail it to you year round." And what ended up happening was that a person that I had mailed some LSD to got into trouble. He got pulled over for a DUI, and he had his cuffs behind his back, and he tried to shove the sheets of acid into the seat of the car, which worked. I guess it was an older car, and after it was a small town. And after about a week, they found them. They interrogated everybody. They threatened him, and he turned over on me. And I ended up being set up. And but when I showed up to his house, I was greeted by the Illinois State Police, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and members of the DEA.
What?
Yeah.
So let me ask you a little bit. Where did you find acid? Did you manufacture it? Did you buy it? How did you deal in that?
Yeah. So, well, interesting story, right? Like my life seems to be just this whole patchwork of synchronicities and meaningful coincidences. And what had happened when I went to Bonner Springs, Kansas, to the show, I got there a day early, and so I went to a rest area where people were camped out ahead of time, and I met a person. And he had an unlimited supply. He could get access to anything. So it was like I ran into one of the suppliers, and he was the one who said, actually, this was his proposition. He said, "Look, we can take your money." I think I had $500, which really at that point in time in the 90s was still a lot of money.
Hmm.
And he said, "We can take this and we can invest this money, and I'll sell the acid. You just have a good time, and we'll at the end you'll still have your money left. And you'll have some acid to take home." And sure enough, like at the end, we had a tremendous amount of acid, and we had a bunch of money. And the next thing I knew, I was in Lexington, Kentucky at the next show. And so what it came down to was I was never really manufacturing. However, I could get the raw crystal. The way that LSD, is, I guess it's either laid down onto paper or it's made into bottles of liquid. And 1 gram of crystal LSD is equal to 10,000 hits. So you have to understand, when people, speak about even touching the crystal, which I've done, like you're instantly peaking, like instantly. So it's a very unusual experience.
A very unusual experience. All right, so yeah, there's a whole manufacture and a whole culture around the distribution of that. Um,
Well, interestingly enough, right? And this is one thing that people don't know about the Grateful Dead is that they were formed around LSD,
mhm.
right? So they had the acid tests that were going on in San Francisco, and you had one person, Augustus Stanley Owsley, and what he was trying to do was put together a house band that would play at all these events. And sure enough, he was able to do that. And they were called the Warlocks, and eventually they became known as the Grateful Dead. And all of their symbology, everything that they use, the bears represents Owsley, and a lot of the symbology represents LSD. And I think that we forget that that was the true culture behind this music.
Yeah, that the documentary on one of the was it Prime or Netflix or something was fantastic and talked about all that stuff. I really enjoyed that. And here we are, we're talking with somebody who's here. You seem somewhat sane and healthy. But then again, you had all these people meet you in Illinois. And what was the result of that encounter when you got rolled over on?
Well, it's a rather long, complex story, but it involved a lot of help from my dad. My dad put out initially a small amount of money, and at the end, just to have somebody sit in on my sentencing, it was close to $75,000. And that was for a 15-minute sentence hearing. So I ended up doing some time in federal prison. And, you know, just to kind of end the story, you'd figure that I would have learned my lesson. However, when I got out of federal prison, I decided to go back out to California and give it a try again.
Hmm. And how did
Yeah.
that work out for you?
Well, I'm here, aren't I? You know,
Yes.
yeah. I think that the best lessons that I learn are from my bad choices, from the mistaken thinking. You know, there's only so much that we can learn from what people tell us, and sometimes it takes these mistaken beliefs to get to the right ones. So.
Sounds like parenting. I have five kids, and well, I've told you this might be this way, but if you want to make that decision, go for it. We'll see what happens. You know.
I can tell you, I didn't consult with my parents
I know
on
that.
on on this at all.
Neither did
You
I.
know,
Neither did I. They would have
yeah,
told me something different. So
yeah.
you've kind of created a name for you in the recovery community, or starting to anyway. How did you start your own recovery, and what does your recovery look like today?
As I had mentioned, I didn't pick up drugs or harmful substances until I was a little bit older. Right.
Hmm.
When I was 15, I began to smoke pot. I never really drank. My mom was an alcoholic, and I swore I would never become an alcoholic. So I became something else. I can say that from the beginning, my relationship with cannabis wasn't healthy. Because it provided me, just like we spoke a little bit about the acid. There was that euphoria to it. There was that release, and I was going through some very challenging times after my parents' divorce, and then when I went to live with my dad afterward, which was very hard. So I began to medicate, and I was working at a Burger King as a breakfast manager while I was in high school, and we had a person transfer down from Detroit, Michigan, and one of the things that they brought along with them was crack. So we would every night after work we would smoke a joint. And he said, would you guys like to smoke a primo? And I'm a young. Now I had never heard of that, so I would say, we'll go ahead and do it. But what I didn't realize was that it took a trip going down into the ghetto. And so I'm a young kid, and I was the driver, and we would go down there, and he would come out with rocks of crack that were the size of marbles. And again, I'd heard about it, I'd read about it, but I didn't understand the implication of what I was doing. And really that I can stop there, because once I picked up the crack, pretty much all bets were off. I faced a lot of consequences, and my relationship with any substance that I picked up from that time wasn't a good one.
Hmm.
And again, with a mom that was in recovery herself and that worked in the industry, she was supportive. And this wasn't a new story. This wasn't a new story to her, because this was an issue that had run in my family for many years.
Mm.
It was something that cost the life of both of her brothers and her sister. And as a child, see, the thing is I may not have had the relationships that she did with them, but I had a relationship with her, and I would have to watch her cry and struggle, over that. So, with the idea that I was like them and that she knew the best way for me to go, I began to approach recovery very traditionally. I went to a lot of NA meetings. I also, did the stuff that other people do. I went into detox. I tried a number of rehabs, several of which I was asked to leave. I was a young kid, and I always liked to talk to girls. And it seemed like at that point in time, they really didn't want you talking to women at all. And, for some reason, I would always end up in a chair next to them, or some reason, sometimes we'd end up in the same chair together. I could never figure it out. And I would be asked to leave. And, even with the support of my family, I would have good years and I would have bad years. I picked up more 1 year, 1 and 2 year tags and tokens that I can imagine, but I never made it to 3 years. I would always seem to get up to a point, and something would happen, and I would pick back up.
Hmm.
So that's what the first part of my recovery looked like. The second part was a little bit different. And interestingly enough, right? So the one thing I did fail to mention was that during that the first time in real effort in recovery, I had an article featured in Grapevine in June of 2014, and it wasn't a pretty story. It was for walking out of a Sears at the Orange Park Mall, just outside of Jacksonville, with 2 Husqvarna chainsaws, and being caught by loss prevention, because that was the kind of human being that I became when I ran out of drugs. For me, the party never stopped. People liked to be with me, not necessarily because they liked me, because they knew my habits when I used drugs.
Hmm.
So
That was a lot of territory you just covered. Oh my goodness. I think your experiences with like the Grapevine article and chainsaws and all of that, and you knew you had to do something a little different in recovery, I think, right?
I tried different sponsors. I thought for a while that a different sponsor was the answer. I also remember thinking that maybe it was the fact, like in NA, they have a step working guide. And that's one of the, like, a lot of sponsorship families are very adamant. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
work out of the step working guide. And after you've done stuff like 3, 4, 5 times, you're like, no, I don't want to do this. And so, like, I did research. Like, there's another a guide that's called Back to the Basic, which is doing questions out of the basic texts that are guided. It's by a gentleman by the name of Greg, who is one of the original founders of NA.
Mm-hmm.
So I would try to find different things to try to look at things differently. I think that there was one thing that was really holding me up. Relationships. I always, I was a young guy at that point in time, and really wanted to settle down. And I was always looking for somebody to get married to. I was always looking for that perfect person. And unfortunately, that would take me a lot of the time away from my recovery. And when I would find that perfect person, they were far from perfect, and it would end up taking me out. So I began to take a look at the little things like that. What am I doing? What are the mistakes that I'm making that continually send me there? But unfortunately, a lot of the work that I was doing was very surface, and I think that becomes the issue. Maybe sometimes it's the sponsor. You can only heal as deep as your sponsor is able to take you. They have to ask you certain questions, in that particular relationship. And with written material, hard to find that heart connection.
So, in the time that we've talked so far, I would assess you as being very self-aware. And I've always believed, well, maybe in the last few years, I've become more to this belief that recovery is a journey to self-awareness. And instead of going surface, and I want you to talk about what you mean by going just surface issues. Talk a little bit about what are surface issues and what does going deep mean? Because I've always talked about going deep and looking inside is where I have the most discovery for my recovery.
I'm very passionate about recovery, and I also believe that some of the stories that I have, that people want to hear them, that they can relate, and that just maybe somebody will hear one of my stories and will decide to do things differently, or will be willing to get help or to take things to the next level. So I'm a little bit verbose sometimes. However, with the psychedelics, I had a terrible relapse. My dad died. I ended up inheriting a significant amount of money. I returned to old behaviors, and I spent roughly 2 years in my bathroom getting high. I was smoking about $3,000 worth of crack a day, and just by accident, as everything else, I was reintroduced to the idea that psychedelics may help, and so that was something at that point in time that I was willing to do. And again, beginning to use these, they immediately have you turn inward. These medicines will have you even re-experience some of the things that you go through. I think that that's with traumatic events, with challenging relationships. That sometimes you really need to go through it again. You need to be able to experience it. Look at it from the outside, almost as a spectator, and be able to make more appropriate choices, as to the way that you want to respond. Because it's not so much what happens, right? It's the way that we respond to things, and so that's what I never got. That was the part that I never understood, was that when I would speak about the relationship with my father, it was very like off of my skin. I could never express how painful it was. I could never express, and nor really did I know, being at such a young age and going through some of the verbal and emotional abuse that I did from him, I didn't realize how deeply it affected me. So I was locked into these repeating behaviors, and I couldn't understand why. And that's the way that I was able to really break free from things, was by I started to recognize, look, this is a pattern. This is a pattern. This is a pattern. And I was able to see, rather than so I went to prison 8 times, right? So you'd think that after the first, second, maybe third time, I would get the message, right? And, I found myself doing things like that, where I would make the same mistake 3 or 4 times. And this was something that allowed me, working with psychedelic medicines, allowed me to step back and really look at things from the outside. They also allowed me to really reframe things with my dad, just with our relationship, because I found that I was a lot more like him than not, and I think that's it's very painful when you realize, wow, I'm like the person that abused me. Maybe I don't react with anger, but I react with sadness. I react with other things. I have a lot of the same feelings, and I had to look at why my dad got there as well.
Wow. Can you describe or talk about how you got introduced to, I love that you said psychedelic medicine, and how that was administered and what the first session was like?
Yeah, so sure. I found them in my bathroom while getting high on YouTube. Yeah, so
Wow.
as I was
Wow.
smoking crack, right, I would watch YouTube, and like all
Wow.
sorts of different things would come up. And by that point in time, I still had some money left, and I was really getting tired of my family. They were concerned about me. But I also had a lot of people from NA that were coming to my house, and I wanted to go. So I decided that I would go to South America and I could find a cocaine and psychedelic shaman. And so I Googled it. I Googled it, and a video came up. Actually, a number of videos came up, right? They were all on a podcast called London Real. And the host did a lot of interviews. And one of them, the one that really caught my eye, was a video interview with Gabor Mate about ayahuasca and addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so I smoked. After seeing this, I said, this might work. And I kept watching the videos, but I smoked on it for about 6 months. Like, I would just watch them and I'd say, yep, I can do this. And I started making efforts then. I started to reach out to retreat centers here in the U.S. I actually paid to go to retreats that I never made. And I finally ended up, I don't know exactly what happened, other than my money was getting low, and I started to have a lot of support from my family where they said, we're willing to try anything. And so I found a practitioner that works with ibogaine. Ibogaine is it's one alkaloid off of the Iboga tabernath, which is a perennial shrub which is native to Africa. It's been used by the Pygmy tribes for thousands of years, and it's really popularized by the Bwidis, who have been using it not only as a rite of passage for young men, but in tonics. They use it for stamina. They use it as an aphrodisiac. But they've also found that people that have substance use disorder, most specifically those that use opiates, have incredible success with it. And I was desperate. I really needed to do something, and I found at this underground practitioner I chose to sit with ibogaine, and that was my first experience.
And what was the first experience like?
There's two parts of it. In the U.S., because the practitioners are doing this on their own and it's not done in a medical setting, or they don't have a lot of support, they give you a smaller dose than they might say if you were to go to Costa Rica or to Mexico. That's called a flood dose. And what I got was a psycho-spiritual dose. So it was small. However, the experience that I had some visuals. The way that those work, you don't have your eyes open. You close your eyes and everything is inside of your head. And so I had a very good introduction, which let me know that, look, this can help. And the interesting thing that I found was, for about 3 or 4 days, I would hear my inner voice. I would hear this whisper. And I would be walking by people and be like, tell them hello and ask them how they're doing. And so I was in a hotel when I did the ibogaine, and I was walking next to some people, and it said, ask them if you can carry their bags. So it was really interesting where it pulled out a deeper presence in me, a deeper good. And that was enough to get me to really want to commit to stop using. But there was more.
Well, tell me more. I'm so fascinated. You got me hook, line, and sinker right now.
Well, so I knew that at that point in time that I might have broken free from the addiction, from the using, because you have to realize, when you're smoking $3,000 worth of crack a day,
I can't imagine.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard. It's no pun intended. It's really hard, right? Yeah. Because you don't end. I didn't sleep. I would pass out after about 2 weeks. I didn't have to eat. It was really bad. And so once I had done this, and I said, you know what, I think I've broken that cycle. That was when I knew I needed to do the deeper work. And so I turned to ayahuasca. I think everybody's heard of ayahuasca now. You've had Will Smith, and you've even had Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback with the Green Bay Packers, speak about this and how it helped him. And so it was something that I felt as though might be able to help to take me to the next level. And I drank in 11 ayahuasca ceremonies over about a 4-month period.
Yeah. And
Well, and I thought that I had all of the answers. I really felt as though I had made some incredible progress. And yet, what I failed to realize was how easy it was to get back into some of those same patterns that I spoke about. So, what I ended up doing when I started to feel better was I started to do some of the things that I did in the past that would continue to make me feel better. I reached out to an ex-girlfriend that I hadn't spoken to in, uh, a few years, and I asked her to move back in with me. And you know, I think we all understand why they're called exes, and that left me with a lot of very uncomfortable feelings that I didn't know how to deal with. In addition, I had went through some physical stuff, and opiates had never been my issue. Like I had some problems with heroin, but overall, opiates had never been an issue. And rather than going to the hospital, I bought some pain pills, and I decided to self medicate. And within 4 months of actually beginning on this, I ended up going back into my bathroom for about another 6 months.
hmm,
Yeah,
you're taking
yeah.
me on quite the roller coaster ride. So, I mean, if I'm feeling this, I can't even imagine what it was like for you to live this. And all right, we're now another 6 months in the bathroom and
Yeah.
turn the
Well,
page.
yes. Well, so you have to understand that this time I was conscious of what I was doing because I had worked with these different plant teachers, and by this point in time, I had committed to this way of life because I signed up for a coaching program. I decided to become a Cambo practitioner. Cambo is the secretion off of a frog that's native to South America. It's not psychedelic. It's a purgative. It helps people with these the cleansing processes, right? So I was all in, and I'm sitting there smoking crack, knowing that what I was doing was wrong, but I couldn't seem to find a way out of it, and that was where the reason why I had related to what Gabor Mate had said was because it was the first time that I had heard someone say uh, that they believe that the main reason why people use is due to trauma and due to these issues in development that many of us have, and that we don't know what to do. And because we come in as these broken human beings, we're trying to medicate. And so that was what had got me at first. And once I came back, that was when I started to actually approach the issues. That was when I started to say, okay, well, now that I know, trauma, my relationship with my father, my relationship with my mother are really big issues, I began to take a look at those. And that was how I actually became abstinent from harmful substances.
What does your recovery look like today?
December 1st was 26 months for me.
Mm-hmm.
So during this 26-month period of time, I have worked with ayahuasca a number of other times. I regularly incorporate psilocybin, that mushrooms that I'm able to pick, into my recovery practice. But honestly, that isn't so much what it's about. I haven't used psychedelics in several months, probably 2 months or so. And I've been spending a lot of time doing integration work, really taking a look at all of these things that got me to where I am today, that will make me a better person, that will make me more capable of helping others. Um, you know, in addition, I do work. I work in this space, right? I'm a paralegal. I work helping practitioners establish church structures with psychedelic medicines. I do coaching. I coach people through experiences because I've been there before. And in addition to that, I try to get to conferences, and I hope to be able to educate people, to be able to get them to the point where they're more informed whether or not they necessarily ever want to use these medicines or not. So I've really dove in. I do a tremendous amount of looking at myself, a lot of introspection, a lot of meditation, a lot of reading. A lot of the things that we might do in normal recovery. However, I've really been able to prioritize what works for me. You know.
So, like we talked about early, there was some controversy even of having psychedelic medicines in a conference. How do you
Mhm.
answer? Well, first of all, the first question is, have you ever been challenged or criticized about this pathway? And what's your response to the quote unquote critics that if you're doing these drugs, you must not really be in recovery? Have you ever heard that?
Mm. Yeah, gosh. Well, I mean, so that you've asked really a bunch of
I
questions at
did.
the same
That's my
time.
style. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and my style's to talk too much. So
Well,
yeah, I get it. Yeah, Phil, I it was very challenging when I first started to do these medicines because I lost a lot of friends, especially from NA.
wow.
Yeah, well, yeah, because even when you do this or when you say something to the effect of, I support cannabis cards. I've got one myself, right? I believe that it's a helpful medication. There are a lot of people that think that abstinence is the only way. But again, with this, it's been a reframing of what's harmful to me and what's not, and it's kept me clean. And when I share all these stories about all this stupid stuff that I did, which I mean, we've only touched the surface of what a knucklehead that I was while I was out there. I hurt myself, but I hurt a lot of people, especially my family, right? And I want to remind people that if I'm just 10% less knucklehead, we should really be supportive of that. And I know that my story is not, it's not uncommon. There are a lot of people that are out there like this themselves. So, have I been? I've lost a lot of friends. I have been challenged over my recovery. I have been told that it's not recovery. I've been told that I couldn't say that I'm clean. I couldn't say, been told that I couldn't say that I was sober. So I've had a lot of that. I haven't really had issues with trying to present the material other than at points of time not having a good presentation. I've at points of time I've said, because this is so new and I'm trying to put together all these facts, I've misspoken more than once. And at one time I said the word all about all of the participants instead of median participants. And I had a couple scalding emails. And that was that, like that's really what I get, because what I do needs to be on point so that people get unbiased information, that they get factual information.
That's fascinating too. So, um, when you're on the cutting edge of any field or any idea, um, as you present it, I think it's a matter of practice. The more you practice, the better you'll get at it, So I know the way I presented about recovery support services and recovery coaching, and I've been talking about it for 20 plus years. The way I talk about it today is a lot different than I talked about it early on. And so, just I'm offering that to you just as encouragement that, and also that if you're not irritating a few people, you're probably not doing it, you probably don't have a topic that's worth mentioning about. Um, so kudos to you for that. I also have a good friend, Jamie McDonald. He's known as Bear. He's going to be at Multiple Pathways of Recovery conference, and he's done the ayahuasca experience too. And um, he describes it as spiritually and life changing for him. So, and that was actually for me. It's really new to me. I haven't heard a lot about it. I'm not overly interested in Well, I am a little interested, if I'm going to be completely honest, about what that might be like for me. But there's a long way to go before I would actually take those steps. So let's just put it that way because of my previous experience. But I tried over all these years, when we talk about multiple pathways of recovery, to become open to pathways of recovery. Why would I, how could I possibly, Mark, tell you, how could I possibly do it as a coach, as a person in recovery, when I see you talking to me rationally, insightfully, honestly, spiritually, that the pathway you're on is wrong or doesn't work? How could I do that? And how do people do that? Do you have any idea?
Well, yeah, I especially with the NA people, right? They're so locked into abstinence, and like it was funny that when I would bring up parts of my story, like when I brought up my relapse with my dad, the messages that I kept getting were, "You're just not working the program perfectly." And I will tell you, I swear to you, I may not have worked the program perfectly, but I did put my all into it. I opened meetings I opened meetings, I chaired meetings, I went, I didn't, there wasn't a day I missed, until I started smoking dope, of course. And I did all this step work. I was so involved, so I knew that wasn't it. It was just with I couldn't get there any other way. So it becomes difficult when people are so locked into what's working for them. And if you're not doing what works for them, it's not recovery. If it's outside of their comfort zone, it's not recovery. And the interesting part of this was, there was the Michael Pollan video, the Change Your Mind videos that came out several months ago. And I thought that was fascinating to have so many NA people reach out to me and all of a sudden want to talk again because there was some sort of backing behind it. And I think what'll end up happening is that as people see the numbers behind this, because we're starting now. For years, they didn't do as much research as they did. And now there is so much research being done. And when people see the numbers that are behind these substances, these medicines, which we're using as catalysts, that's all they are. They're a catalyst, which just takes what we know to another level. That's all. When you see them used as a catalyst and you see these success numbers, I hope that'll change. But it's
Yeah, I've come to after training coaches for all this time, that um, people with less than 10 years, and that, that's the time mark is it's just a very general marker, right? So you probably have 10 years of recovery minus, like, all those other times when you say you weren't in recovery. One guy at a meeting said, "I have 10 years of recovery except for 3 days." And I thought that was beautiful. Um, but around the 10-year mark, and it was true for me, so I'll just speak for me, that I became less defensive of my pathway of Alcoholics Anonymous and abstinence, because I thought that was the only way. And that's about when I started working at CCAR and started to get exposed to other pathways. And then I also realized, Mark, if you want to recover different than me, that your recovery is not a threat to me. I don't have to defend mine, and you don't have to defend yours. So um, I love what you're saying about that. I too also feel that there's more of a willingness and an openness to explore, finally, other pathways of recovery that could help people. So kudos to
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Well, I can say, you'd mentioned other pathways, and that was one thing that I tried.
Mhm.
I started Refuge Recovery in St. Pete. I believe that no matter what works, that's great. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for the 12-step fellowships.
Oh, me too.
I watched what they do for my mom. I watched what they did for other members of my family. I know what they did for me. Well, I didn't end up sober or clean, and I became a better human being. And I was also given all of these tools, which I promise you, I still use today.
Right.
You know,
I have and I think about the term pathways, multiple pathways, and to me, it as that's evolved, it becomes more of a tapestry of recovery, and the tapestry has many different colors in it. So if I was founded in like Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's a deep royal blue, there's still a lot of blue in my tapestry of recovery, and we just bring in other colors and other things to make this beautiful tapestry that happens to be life. Yeah.
well, agreed. And I think that's the great thing about MPRC is
Hmm.
that people can come in and they can pick whatever they want on that quilt, on
Right.
that patchwork, and they can decide what they'd like to learn about, what they'd like to incorporate, and find just the right people there that they're able to talk to.
Hmm.
There are so many different things that just pathways and different views that will be represented at MPRC. I'm really excited.
I learned so much, Mark. Thank you so much for spending the time today. I appreciate you very much, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
I value your time.
All right. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Thank you. Bye.